Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next The Rise of Kyoshi chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 23, which is called Questions and Meditations. This one is more preparation ahead of the big raid to obviously free one of Mok's allies, repay the favor of the Flying Opera Company to the Autumn Bloom Society. Most of this chapter consists of a couple of scenes between Kyoshi and Lao Ji, mainly getting across the idea of, once again, him trying to point out, here's why you should consider killing Governor Tae, and why perhaps killing Jianzhu isn't really the best goal to have, considering what they both have done and the way most people view each of them and their actions. We also see more of the actual preparation, mainly Rangi and Kirima preparing for the actual plan, and just settling on, in a way, where everyone is going to be during the events of the plan. So let's get into this. So yeah, Kyoshi and Lao Ji walking through the town, the village of Zigan, Z-I-G-A-N, and this is the town that supplies food and manpower to Governor Tae's palace. So this is the one most affected by him, and they immediately see that one, there's not that many people here, which is kind of surprising considering it's a pretty kind of notable place in a way. And yeah, they hadn't encountered an actual person until they were well into the heart of the village. They immediately encounter a guy trying to buy some rice, but he's arguing about, the price is an outrage, and the farmer's just saying that most of the rice gets confiscated for the governor's silos, and he has to set the price based on the little bit that he has left over. And they just kind of point out that, the storehouse of Governor Tae is huge. They can see the roof of that house from here, and they note he hasn't opened those silos for 5 years. And they might as well consider that food eaten by the spirits. And Kyoshi can see the point Lao Ji is trying to make, but doesn't really want to buy into it, because she knows what point he's trying to make. Reserving food for an emergency isn't foolish or corrupt. No. But secretly selling your reserves for off-the-books profit is. To enrich himself, Tae has traded away the grain he's collected every year since he was appointed governor. He's persisted during bad harvest when his citizens have gone hungry enough to abandon their homes. Most famines are man-made, and he is on the verge of making one. Tell me, has Jianzhu ever failed his people in this manner? And yeah, she has to note that, Yokoya's only grown since Jianzhu has kind of planted this flag there, as it says right here. And here in Zigan, this is a place where it's really struggling. It says here, they were starving, they weren't starving yet, but would be soon. She recognized the weight of hunger on their shoulders, the same one she felt on hers as she went from door to door in Yokoya after being dumped there, rejected in turn by every family, her options dwindling. And she knows how eventually that humanity is going to break down as starvation and helplessness took over, and eventually it will just cause chaos. That, Governor Tae is quickly creating this situation where it's going to break down sooner rather than later, and the people are going to suffer, but he won't. And that's the point that's going to be made here. She can't call what Lao Ji is trying to point out wrong. Now, Lao Ji was claiming to be that mercy for Zigan, for hundreds of people instead of just one girl. She had no reason to call him wrong. Next, we go back to the camp with the Flying Opera Company, and we see Kyoshi gives the food that they did get. They got sweet potatoes, not rice, because rice was so expensive, of course. And she quickly spots that Kirima and Rangi are surveying the palace. They'd come to a temporary truce over their mutual appreciation for intelligence gathering. Casing a joint was pretty much the same thing as planning an assault. So she stands behind them, secretly watching them interact, and basically Rangi's discussing the sort of architecture that they're dealing with here, and the best way to, I suppose, attack it. Kirima is interested in this. How do you know so much about old Earth Kingdom architecture? In the academy, we studied how to attack any kind of fortification. Walled fire temples, Earth Kingdom stockades. And Kirima says, polar ice walls? Yes. Preparedness carries the day. There was even a plan for bossing Sei, though I'd pity the troops who carried it out. Interesting reference there, in that I assume that's meant to be a sort of fun little piece of foreshadowing, potentially going into the whole siege of Bossing Sei that Iroh ended up kind of being in charge of, and the whole mentioning, you know, she's worried about anyone who would actually have to carry that plan out. Is that what happened to Liu 10? Now, it's just a little one, like, is that really what it's meant to be? But I think that sort of a reference is kind of what this book has been doing. Stuff that even happens in the future being set up right now, that the Fire Nation does have a plan if they ever needed to attack Ba Sing Se. So, they note here, Mok will attack the south gate directly. That's a killing field. A few earthbenders and Tay's guard could cause massive casualties. And Kirima just notes that Wei and Mok have basically been speaking in such a way to his men that they've become fanatics, that they're so into this group that they're willing to basically kill themselves for no matter what the cause to support this thing. So this is how bad this is going to be. Kyoshi shuddered to think of the slaughter that would follow if the Dao Fei succeeded. She'd never heard of a siege where the attackers didn't repay the cost of victory in blood. So they note that Kirima considers like we might have to, you know, capture the entire palace to make this happen. That's the only way to let Mok stroll right through. Kyoshi says that's not going to happen, and she reveals herself that they're actually still there. And she notes that the reason she's so quiet is that servants have to be quiet. That's how she was able to sneak up on them, and that they have to talk. She needs their advice. Not the kind of cryptic advice of Lao Ji. She needs advice from Kirima and Rangi, who are much more clear-cut with their advice. Then we go to her dust-stepping training. Wong is trying to teach her the dust-stepping technique. It's a pretty quick scene, just getting across the idea that even with her fans and her advancement of her abilities, dust-stepping is still a little bit too precise of a maneuver for Kyoshi at this point in time. She can't quite get it right. She can form the thin pillar, but she can't make it quick enough and strong enough to support her weight. Even though it only has to support one step, it's still not quite working. She nearly kills herself falling off this thing as well. So they get across the idea that she tries a bunch of times, still doesn't work, and they're maybe thinking that, oh, Kyoshi might have to sit the mission out. But Lao Ji uses this kind of excuse as a way for like Kyoshi to come with him during the mission. And it's interesting that Lao Ji doesn't often speak up to the rest of the group and kind of be sort of a leader in a way, but he steps up here and is like, I'll babysit her on the raid. They'll go together. And they all agree on this. So Lao Ji has Kyoshi to himself for the raid, so they can potentially go off and assassinate Governor Tay if they need to. So everything's working on Lao Ji's plan. But yeah, we get the last scene of the chapter here, which is a very interesting one. At nighttime, they basically, in a way, have their next assassination lessons, in a way. Haven't you wondered why Mok's goal isn't to kill Governor Tay? Kyoshi says, he knows you're going to do it. Lao Ji laughed. And I used to believe you didn't have a sense of humor. No, the reason is that he has the same piece of information I do. Palaces built in the Hao period often had an iron safe room hidden in their depths. In case of an attack, the lord of the manor would flee there and lock himself behind impenetrable metal doors. The vaults had supplies to last a month, which was more than enough time for reinforcements to arrive. Mok knows trying to kill the governor would be a waste of effort. Kyoshi says, he's going to abandon the household to an army of Dao Fei? What did you expect from a wealthy official? You sound disappointed. Perhaps you assumed Tay would stride onto the field of battle at great risk to himself and fight off Mok's forces single-handedly with an incredible display of earthbending, protecting scores of innocent lives. I don't know where you got that image from. Her hackles rose. It seemed like the old man never let an opportunity to sing Jianzu's praises go by. She tried to calm herself by returning to her meditation. That's just an idea about the approach that Lao Ji has in dealing with Kyoshi. Of just like, he knows she wants to kill Jianzu, but he personally has no issue with Jianzu, and in a way most people don't. He is an overall probably net positive to the world, whereas Governor Tay is a net negative, and that's where the point he's trying to make in this, that if Kyoshi could, I suppose, remove her sort of personal views of things out of the picture, she'd be able to see that that was the case. And it's interesting because he effectively is sort of in a way teaching her as the avatar. He's trying to give her that perspective of, you, once you assume your role as the avatar, are going to have to think about things in this way to deal with conflicts like this. When you come to a town like this as the avatar, they're going to expect you to resolve it in some way. And you can't, you know, deny someone just because of like a personal issue that you have with them. You have to go for what's best for like the people overall, the balance of nations overall. And Jianzhu is for the balance of nations. Governor Tay is just for himself. And he's teaching her these lessons, but Kyoshi's still set on having her own opinion on things. That her want to kill Jianzhu is kind of important to her. But what is she going to do when the time actually comes? That's the key to all this. He then asks her, so you're telling me you never wondered about my age? He's trying to goad her on purpose. I can't say that I have. It's just the people who've openly confronted me in the past with the name Tiguai the Immortal. To a man, they all begged me for the secrets of longevity. The only ones who didn't were you and your mother. Very interesting there. I think we know that pretty much already, that when Kyoshi first figured out that he was Tiguai the Immortal, she never asked him if he was that old. There was obviously the one moment, I think like 2 chapters ago, where she asked him, are you Guru Shoken? But it was more like just because he was directly talking about it there. And obviously Jasa didn't really inquire about it either. But the idea here is that if she thinks he's like over 200 years old, potentially thousands of years old, she's never asked him how he lived that long, whereas that's what everyone else has. This is what she says. Sifu, she drawled. Oh, please impart upon me the mysteries of immortality, for I wish to watch eras pass before my eyes like the grains out of an hourglass. Of course, Laoji said brightly, anything for my dear student. You see, it all comes down to maintaining order, keeping things neat, clean, and tidy. Excuse me? Yoshi's kind of taken aback by this, because she's a housekeeping servant. That was her job at the mansion. She's so used to keeping things neat and tidy. And she feels offended by this because Lao Ji is this like haggard old man who like doesn't look after himself really at all apparently. But he's talking about being neat, clean and tidy. But he clarifies it here. Aging is really just your body falling apart on the smallest, most invisible levels and neglecting to put itself back together. With the right mental focus, you could take an inventory of your own body and place each little piece that's not where it should be back into the correct order. The way you describe it, you'd have to decide what version of yourself you'd be stuck as forever. Exactly. Those who grow, live, and die. The stagnant pool is immortal, while the clear-flowing river dies an uncountable number of deaths. Is that another proverb of Shoken's? Because it doesn't sound like any spiritual lesson I've heard. It's my proverb. He says, all this fretting about spirits, I'm trying to teach you about the mind, an infinite world that's been neglected by far too many explorers. And yeah, it's just hurt him saying, my dear, as you'll discover one day, the mind has specters of its own. And Kyoshi's really kind of grasping on like what he's trying to get at here, because he has effectively told her here, this is how you live for a very, very long time. It's about understanding what, what aging is and countering that with effectively, as it will be later explained, is effectively sort of through meditation and like control over your chi and stuff like that. And he's telling her to meditate to the point where you can control almost like every aspect of your body. And then the point she makes is that like, wait, are you saying that like if I concentrate hard enough on a version of myself, I can sort of keep myself that way like for a very, very long amount of time? And I think that's kind of what they're getting at here. Like they're setting up effectively the idea of why most of the time, like we see Kyoshi in a way, like I suppose Kyoshi's always looked like adult Kyoshi for like her entire life, I suppose effectively, that if she did this immortality kind of training long enough, she could just look like adult Kyoshi for her entire life and not age. Whereas I suppose Lao Ji is perfectly fine with keeping himself looking old but keeping himself alive. And it's a very interesting idea. They go into it a little bit more, like as we'll see, Kyoshi will actually start to do this training and they'll at least touch on little pieces of it. But the core of it is here, and they're just explaining it. It's like effectively the idea of like obviously like entropy, everything that's ordered eventually becomes disordered, and this meditation is like the counter to that. It's putting everything back into order to kind of counteract the idea of aging. And it ultimately is an idea that sort of makes a lot of sense. If like benders and stuff like that, and even, you know, gurus and stuff like that can deal with their energy within their body to help their chakras flow and stuff like that, then yeah, I suppose on one hand you could also use that same thing to counteract the idea of aging. You know, it's a little bit more technical, but it's an explanation that sort of makes sense. But I like that they're teasing it. I was wondering, like, prior to this book coming out, would they even touch on this at all? And through the character of Lao Ji, they've already got across the idea that multiple people in the world have learned this ability to live that long. And here's Kyoshi basically being thought it. And I think that's so cool that they were able to come up with a good solution to this. But again, we'll get into more on that a little bit later on. But yeah, the main core of this is, like I said, it's Lao Ji continuing to have Kyoshi question what she is going to do on this mission, on this raid, but also question her overall goal, which is to get powerful enough to defeat Jianzhu. And he's just pointing out to her that, you know, her personal vendetta against Jianzhu is just personal. It is really just her that hates him, whereas Governor Tay, her taking him out would help so many more people. And it is that sort of Avatar type training of just the decisions she is kind of going to have to make when she decides to step up as the Avatar, and what is just and what is justice, and is taking out Jianzhu justice, or is it just, you know, revenge? And it's him pointing out, like you said earlier on, the idea of, like, in the middle of a heated battle you can just like choke a bunch of, you know, bending at someone and like open your eyes and see what the result is, versus, you know, what it means to actually just kill someone and just be able to go on with your daily life. And it's this weird thing where, like, he's kind of trying to teach her to be an assassin, but in a way he's actually trying to teach her how to be the Avatar when it comes to killing, and is almost leading her in the direction of thinking about it so much that she will stray away from the path of being a full-on assassin about things, that she probably in a way would be better not being that way. But it's so thought-provoking, I think, is the main thing to get across here. But yeah, they're my thoughts on this chapter. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.